I'm speaking today with Laure Kayser, an assistant professor in the departments of Material Science and Engineering and Chemistry at the University of Delaware. Laure earned her undergraduate and master's degrees in chemistry from the University of Strasbourg in France, her PhD in chemistry from McGill University in Montreal, Canada, and her postdoc as a member of my group in the Department of Nanoengineering at UC San Diego. Laure began her independent career in the fall of 2019. So, thanks for doing this, Laure, and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Darren.
This is the question that I ask all of my guests. What should the world know about French spirits made from unusual fruits?
Yes. That sounds like a very general question to ask everybody. They should know that it's the best thing in the world, that it should be, you should drink it responsibly, obviously. It's amazing. It's made from fermented fruits, and you can use whichever type of fruit you would like. Favorites. I probably would say Mirabelle. So Mirabelle is a type of sweet yellow plum that's very typical of my region, where I grew up in Alsace. They're amazing, and I can't find anything like it in the U.S., which is really tragic.
Did you grow up in a rural area?
Yes, I did. My grandparents have a farm, and so as a child, I grew up on that farm, and we had like potato fields, cows, a couple pigs, lots of chickens, bunnies, but not the pet bunnies, the bunnies for eating, which are it's delicious. And yeah, so that's how I was raised, with a big garden and a farm.
Did it influence your decision to go into chemistry, or where did that interest arise?
No, it had absolutely nothing to do with anyone in my family. My dad didn't even finish high school. He works as a factory worker. He probably would be at the same level as an engineer by now, but he's about to retire in a year. My mom is an accountant. She works for a company that supplies like bakery supplies, so like absolutely nothing related to chemistry. So like my chemistry interest started in high school, and I loved not chemistry. I loved chemistry, but I loved arts and making stuff and doing things with my hands. And I had a fabulous like chemistry and physics teacher who I eventually talked to, and he was telling me that he actually wasn't thinking about doing chemistry or physics when he was younger, and he had like an undergrad major in arts, and he later became a physics and chemistry teacher. It's like, oh, well, I could do the same. And my parents kind of convinced me that art is not necessarily a career, and I could always do it on the side, and I should pursue chemistry instead, which was a lot of fun and hands-on and really cool.
What convinced you, or what led you to make the move to North America, and particularly Canada?
Yeah, so actually the master's in Europe is a little bit different from the master's in the US. And the first year of the master, you have the choice of like doing it abroad. And so my first year of master, I actually did it in Quebec City. And the reason I wanted to go to Quebec City in Canada is because I had visited Quebec City as a 12-year-old with my parents, and I had a really fond memory of it. I remembered Chateau Frontenac, which is that big hotel like on the St. Lawrence River, and for some reason it stuck with me. And so when I had the option of traveling abroad, I was like, I want to go to Quebec City, which is what I did. So I spent like 6 months there, and I had a really great experience. I really fell in love with Canada. It was also during the summer, so I didn't experience the winter, which probably I should have known that the winter would be cold after when I joined for the PhD. So I came back to France, finished my master's in France. So the second year, there's a lot of courses. It's a very class-heavy time, and so you kind of stuck there. So, but you still do an internship, you still do lab work, and so I did my internship in a lab in Strasbourg, doing like inorganic chemistry and single molecular magnets. And at the time, there's somebody from McGill University that came and gave a talk at the University of Strasbourg, and I met with her, and it's like I really like your work. Are you taking any PhD students? And so I applied to McGill, and I went there. I didn't end up joining her group, which is a funny story because I arrived there. I arrived at McGill and like met with her, and she's like, I don't know if I'm taking anybody this year because I might be moving. I actually might be moving to the University of Strasbourg. It's like, no. And so I ended up joining a different labs. Like, I'm not going back there. I don't want to. Which, Strasbourg is a great place, but I wanted to like transition and see something else. And it was just a great opportunity to move away from home a little bit.
Did you expect a language barrier? I know you had spent some time there, so you sort of knew, but how did education at McGill go?
So my master was in Quebec City, and everything in Quebec City was in French. McGill is an English-speaking school, even though it's in a French-speaking province. And joining McGill, like I knew some English, and I thought I was pretty good. Like I can have a conversation with somebody in English. And then I started taking classes in English, and that was a massive slap in my face.
Mainly because of scientific nomenclature, or just idiomatically and the way people speak?
It was a little bit of both. It was, so the first class that I took was a crystallography class with a professor that was amazing, but had the strongest accent I have ever heard. I could not, for the life of me, understand what he was saying. And so like I ended up, which is really stupid, I ended up missing the first assignment. I didn't submit anything because I never understood that there was an assignment.
This is the accent of an individual who was not a native English speaker.
Oh, no, he was a native English speaker.
So,
I was.
So it was a very heavy North American English accent.
Yeah, which I just wasn't used to. Great teacher, big beard, and like really friendly, but mumbling constantly. And it was just so bad. I could not understand a thing of what he was saying, and I was so embarrassed. I was the only one not understanding him, and so I never asked him to repeat anything. I was just like sitting in class and not understanding a damn world.
This sounds like the substrate for nightmares throughout life. I have a recurring nightmare where I'm taking some math class and I didn't do any of the homework, and I'm like gonna get an F, and I've had this same nightmare for like years. Like once a month for years. And this sounds like exactly what you're describing. Like you didn't know that there was anything due because of this heavy Canadian English accent.
I think he was American.
This American English accent.
He still is American, probably. Well, maybe he's got his Canadian citizenship. But yes, I lived that nightmare. I still remember the room, exactly how it looked like and how embarrassed I was, and it was horrible. And so I had to do something about it. Like I was hanging out a little bit with like the French speaking people at McGill. There was a lot of like Quebecois people that were speaking French. There was a couple French people from France also, and I was having lunch with them. I was in a very small group. We were only like 3 or 4 people. And so there was not a lot of chances for me to practice my English and like get used to like hearing it. And so like I had to like do something about it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to join every possible association that I can to like try to force myself to not only speak more, but to meet people that don't speak French. And so that worked out like pretty well for me. I eventually caught up, watched movies, TV shows, like really immersed myself in the English language. Otherwise would have been a disaster.
Were there any particular movies or TV shows where the actors spoke in a way you wanted to emulate?
I was watching a lot of X-Files at the time. I don't know if I was trying to emulate my inner Scully or something.
Well, I mean, better that as a scientist than your inner Mulder.
Yes. Definitely identify more with Scully than Mulder.
When did things click language-wise? When did you start making friends? How many years in?
Probably year two. I would say I had a fairly long PhD. It took me like 5.5 years to complete my PhD, and it was due to many factors, but like language is one of them. The project might have been another, lack of motivation in the first couple of years due to isolation and such. Eventually, year two, I think, was when I was starting to make more friends. I found other people like me, and there was the group of women also doing their PhD, and like feeling like as isolated as I was, and needed somebody to talk about their project and like what was going on and everything. And we were TA together also, so which helped a lot.
What did you learn at the time that you look back upon as a way to generate a more inclusive culture in your own group? Is there I'm not saying anything about your own group, but just your experiences as an outsider, and now in your new job, creating an environment that's inclusive. Did you take any lessons from that time?
Yeah, I think I wasn't as sensitive to those issues when I was a PhD student, and I regret that. Like there are members that joined the lab when I was maybe in my third and fourth year, and in retrospect, I didn't have the most inclusive behavior. I didn't probably didn't make them feel welcome or help, and so now I'm really trying to like not force my group, but like pick people that join my group that are going to be helpful and that are going to be open to other cultures, and people that don't look like them, have different backgrounds, and helping each other. And so that's trying to learn from the mistakes that I made as a PhD student.
What makes a good lab culture to you?
I would say like you have a good lab culture when you have one of your colleagues that would drop whatever they're doing to come and help you. And that's really what I'm trying to like get at in my group, and I think it's working really well right now. I have 4 graduate students, and they're all great. They're all in their first year, so there's nobody. Well, I guess they're second year now. I'm a second year faculty, but they all have their special skill and specialty and things they know, but they're all first years, and so they have to help each other to get somewhere, because I, like with COVID, I haven't been able to be in the lab as much as I want to. I'm at home. We have Slack, and I can help like kind of remotely. I still go to the lab. I was in the lab this morning. I was like showing one of my students how to run a column. So like that's the type of behavior that I want. Somebody that would help constantly, and I think that makes for a good lab culture. You're not necessarily going to be friends with your colleagues, but you have to be respectful and ready to help. And I think that's crucial.
When you moved to UCSD, you went from all degrees in only chemistry, with a very chemistry-oriented PhD thesis, and you joined an engineering lab. Was there any trepidation in becoming the only chemist in a lab of engineers?
Yes, I mean, I've always liked to be the outsider, like I want to be the one that's special, that brings something special. I was often the only woman in the lab. I was the only immigrant in the lab. And I think that was like just one other challenge. It's like, oh, I want to be the only chemist in an engineering lab. There was Fumitaka at the time, which was awesome to have somebody to talk to.
But he
about
only had
chemistry.
a few, yeah, and he only had a few months left at the time you started.
Yeah, I think I really liked the challenge, and I loved everything that I learned. And the skill set is different, and it sometimes shouldn't be necessarily, but it was really good, and I felt valued as a chemist in an engineering lab, which was a really great. So maybe if there are listeners that are thinking about like going from chemistry to engineering or vice versa, there's like a lot of need for like connections between the two disciplines.
I always said that the best thing that I did in terms of my career prospects was getting my stuff called engineering, because at the time that I finished my degree in chemistry, I was kind of like, I was like a broken toy. I had a degree in chemistry, but I didn't do any chemistry as a grad student. So it was, I don't know, I found engineering quite welcoming, I think, because chemistry has the power to fill some niches and meet some needs that can't really be met by any other discipline, particularly in material science and especially in the science of soft materials.
There's a lot of overlap, and so I think the two fields are more similar than they want to admit, especially in material science. There's a lot of chemistry. You just can't get around not doing any chemistry if you're doing material science.
Right. Like, what's the definition of chemistry is the structure and properties of matter and the changes that it undergoes. And then a material
Yeah.
scientist would say, well, that's the definition of material science.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of my pet peeve. Like I really hate like having categories and having to fit in a category. And that's one of the reason my lab is like really interdisciplinary, and like I like being in a material science and engineering department, and I also love being in a chemistry department, and I wish there were only just one big happy department. Obviously that's not going to happen, but even within the field of chemistry, I feel like the like putting people in boxes like divisions is really outdated. Like I would consider myself a synthetic chemist, but I also do polymer chemistry. I do organic chemistry. I do organometallic chemistry. I do material science. I do physical chemistry. I do all of those things. So why do you want to put me in a box? And
Yeah.
I really get angry and have strong feelings about it.
It's so columnar in chemistry departments. You have inorganic, physical, bio, organic, sometimes analytical, and they have their own lecture series. They have their own speakers and cliques, and I think it's a little bit less likely to happen in an engineering department. But I don't know, maybe
Yeah.
I'm now very hopelessly biased.
Yeah. I think it still does happen in engineering. Like in our department, we don't really have like divisions, but there is like sometimes there can be a big demarcation between hard and soft materials. And again, like I kind of fit in between, right? I do electronic materials, which would be considered hard, but at the same time, I do polymer chemistry, which are soft materials. So,
Yeah. In
and I
in my
think, sorry, I think like one of the big thing why it annoys me is from an inclusivity perspective. Like if you're gonna fail your organic chemistry class, you might not look like at organic chemistry, but I feel like I do organic chemistry, and so like it's okay if you're not getting great grades in organic chemistry, you can still be doing polymer chemistry, you know.
and it's okay if the materials are disordered and not every molecule has exactly the same molecular weight. You know, these barriers that kept polymer chemistry outside of, you know, the normal distribution of what happens in an organic lab for a long time. I always felt that that the synthetic side of chemistry, so synthetic organic, synthetic inorganic, synthetic organometallic chemistry, was a lot closer to engineering epistemologically than practitioners like to admit. I mean, they're designing something, they're trying to solve some problem, and of course they want to know how it works, and that's the science part, but philosophically it's engineering. I mean, a mechanical engineer does the same thing, right? Except it's with continuum mechanics and, you know, robotics and integrated systems. And I feel that there's sometimes a lack of consilience between these fields, which should probably exist.
Yeah, and that like I think in terms of like skills, like engineering probably could use a little bit more organic chemistry, and chemistry could use a little bit more like senior design type things, you know,
Yeah,
like building things and like thinking about problem solving rather. I think like one of the articles you shared when we were a postdoc, when I was a postdoc in your group, was that Whiteside's paper, like thinking about polymers as molecule versus materials, and that really stuck with me because I really like I try to incorporate both. Like I like the molecules because it's beautiful, but I also it needs to perform some sort of function also, which is where I want to be.
Yeah. And I think this is our business model, labs like yours and mine. I think this is what we're trying to do is build these bridges. How does recruiting work in a lab that is so interdisciplinary?
Well, I only had to recruit like once or twice, I guess, now with this coming season. I don't recruit too much based on previous skill. I like usually when I tell incoming students whether they're material science or chemistry is like, look, it's very unlikely you've worked with organic electronics before, and maybe some of them will have a polymer background, and that's great. Others might have like a completely different background entirely, but if they're motivated and they want to learn and they're interested, I'm that's usually how I choose like students that join my group. And it usually ends up being people from very different background, bringing really different perspectives. And I think that works really well for me. I wouldn't want to box myself in taking only, oh, okay, you have to have made P3HT before in your undergrads. Like, no, like that's not what I'm looking for anymore.
So of your 4 students, which ones are material scientists and which ones are chemists, or how many in each bucket?
Yeah, so I have one material science student, I have 2 inorganic chemistry students, and I have 1 organic chemistry student. And next semester, I'm trying to like push the balance a little bit more towards material science because that's where my main appointment is at. But like really, it wasn't by design. In the end, all of my students are doing some chemistry and some characterization and some mechanical testing and more like pure material science type things. So I don't really make a distinction. It's really like based on interest and motivation.
Speaking of interest and motivation, what is the scientific problem that excites you the most right now?
Like in my group, probably.
Yeah.
Things that I'm working on. I would say like trying to tailor materials specifically for biological application and specifically bioelectronics. So some of what my group is really interested in is controlling not only how electrons or holes move in an organic semiconductor, but also looking at ion injection, which is really important for when you're trying to incorporate those materials into the human body, for example. So we're like really interested in those like really fundamental processes and how to optimize them. We have also lots of other projects that are equally interesting. Like we have a lot of interest in like environmentally friendly like synthesis of those materials. And one like probably half of my lab at this point works on a project that we called plastics to electronics upcycling. So trying to take like plastic waste and using that as like a cheap, available everywhere and not like honestly a big problem, and transforming them into something useful like electronic materials.
Great. Given the Pacific garbage patch and everything we're learning about microplastics, microwaving this or that piece of plastic dishware creates all kinds of materials that we didn't appreciate ever really. This is a big issue. Let me ask you a little bit about the faculty application process, and particularly applying as an interdisciplinary person. How did you find the right job postings? How did those interviews go? Do you feel that you got heard by the right people, and how are you treated afterwards?
In terms of applications, I applied pretty broadly in chemistry, material science, and I think 2 chemical engineering departments. ads. I have to say that Kim Jobber had like the most thorough list of openings
We
for
will be
faculty
sure
position.
to tag Chem Jobber when we tweet this video.
Yes, I owe him a great deal. Most of the places I applied to were chemistry, and I think chemistry just had more openings that year in polymer chemistry and material science, and maybe it was an odd year, but I felt like there was specific ads that I was seeing. It's like, oh my god, I'm going to be perfect for those, and I did apply, and that worked. That worked out pretty well. The material science departments, because they were not curated by Chem Jobber, like I had a harder time finding them. I would see them on Twitter, uh, CNN News, and what is it? How is it called? Like academicjobs.com or something like that. But it was
Hmm.
harder. It was a little bit harder to find. Um, and eventually, yeah, I did apply more to chemistry departments just because that's where my background was at and that's where I felt more comfortable.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think just to interject for a moment, the job that I eventually got did not show up under any of my search terms. So nanoengineering didn't show up under chemi or material science or chemistry. And I ended up just inquiring because there was this senior position available, but it turns out that there was also a junior position, somewhere else happening in the engineering school, which that position could go to nanoengineering, which of course it eventually did. So casting a wide net is very important. Sorry to interrupt.
What was the second part of your question?
I guess the question is, did people get it? If they were, if you were pitching chemistry to a material science audience, were they just, wow, this is so cool, it's like magic? Or did they say, what is this? This person is not a good fit.
It really depends on the department. There are certain departments that really wanted to see like a chemistry innovation. They really wanted me to say what reaction I was going to develop. They weren't too interested in like the big picture almost. So like they wanted to know what I was going to be famous for in chemistry, like very, very specifically. There are other departments, and they're usually the more interdisciplinary departments that were really excited about my program because it was interdisciplinary. Then in material science, I think most of the interviews I got in material science, I got a pretty good feedback for when I got the interview. And so I think that was okay. Like a few departments of chemistry, I probably would not have seen myself there, and they didn't see me there either, and I didn't get enough.
What should the community know about spousal and partner hiring?
It's hard. So maybe I can give numbers just to give some perspective as to like how the faculty application went. So I sent a little bit over 40 applications. I had 15 Zoom or phone interviews. I got 10 on-site interviews, and then I got 5 offers. Of
Which
those
is an
five,
outstanding percentage, by the way, but that's what I think. So anyway,
of those five, we needed to find a place that would work for both myself and my partner, and that was difficult. And people, when we were starting, told us it was impossible. It would not happen. And so we had plan B and C, and like what we would do if only one of us got an offer at a really good place. What would happen? All five universities tried to make it happen. They tried to like have some position for my partner. Some of them were like, we can offer him a postdoc position somewhere, to like an RA position, which was fine, but no startup. So just like a little bit more than a postdoc salary, no startup, to like get a lab off the ground. And so there was a long process because there was a lot of negotiation happening with each universities. Um, Eventually, the University of Delaware is the one that made the best offer to both of us. And that, I mean, I really liked Delaware, and he really liked Delaware, and it's a fantastic place to do polymer research and soft matter research. And so it was really, really great that things lined up and we both got tenure track offers here. But it was not easy, and I pretty much know that we pulled off a miracle.
If you were dean or university president, is there any kind of policy that you would put into place?
Yeah, and so I think that's really what's helped the University of Delaware. They have a really good dual career program, so it's not they will help make something happen, and I think it's really powerful. I had I had five really really good offers, and if it was just me by myself, it would be a very very difficult like decision to make. And so what Delaware did is they put themselves on top of the list, and it was an easy decision. And so if you're looking into recruiting like top candidates, you can make those simple things happen. And I know everybody's on budget restrictions, etc., but having a place where you can have conversation between different departments and different chairs, and at not only at the college level but across colleges, I think those policies are really powerful into getting your top candidates.
Yeah, it's almost like the campus that's willing to go not even out on a limb, but just make an effort is the one that will stand out. Uh, what do you wish you knew before you started as an assistant professor about being an assistant professor?
I wish I knew how to prepare a class. I think that's I've been really struggling with classes. It's taking so I knew it would take a long time, but it's taking so much longer than I want to. I want to do a good job. I want to give like the students like the best class they ever had. And I right now, like with COVID and online teaching, I'm settling for good enough because yeah, I need to survive. And I think I wish I knew that I should have thought about what my classes would be and prepare uh, some slides even on some topics in advance, because it's a lot of work.
Yeah,
It's fun. I love teaching, but it's a lot of work.
it is. I remember when I started my position in the fall of 2012, my wife was still working at her postdoc at our previous institution, and that was that was a sad thing for a while because it was like a whole quarter, but at the same time I was probably preparing for that class for 40 hours a week, on top of building the lab and recruiting the first group of graduate students and a postdoc, and ordering all the equipment and putting it together, myself along with my students. And I had never taken that class. Like as a student, I think I had to read the book two or three times, made one set of notes, threw them all away, and then started again, because I didn't know how the story ended. um, and then I even remember going into the lecture hall. I can't even imagine doing this on Zoom for the first time. I mean, that's a whole nother learning curve. But I used to go into the lecture hall and do the whole thing out the night before, like at 8 p.m., the night before the lecture. And I would do it all with chalk. And then only then would I feel prepared. Like this was a graduate class and a topic that I'd never had an undergrad or graduate class in. And I was scared to death of it. And there were moments when teaching if a student had asked anything with more depth than what I had already written on the board, I would have just said, I'm sorry, I have no idea. Like the first time, it was just a matter of survival, like getting the facts up on the board. Later on, when I talked to students who had taken the class the first year, thankfully, none of them really seemed to notice, but I knew, and I knew later on when I learned, there were some concepts that I really didn't get until the third or fourth year that I taught it. And anyway, this is my deficiency. Sorry for the garden path.
No, I'm exactly the same. It's I feel bad for the students like taking their class with me for the first time. But I got pretty good reviews of the first class I taught, and it was graduate elective on organic electronics. So it was like it was my own field, and so it was okay. But it was like it's a big field, and I was working on a very narrow subset of it, and it also made me realize like everything I don't know about my field, but it was great learning experience. It's just like I'm learning like the night before I'm teaching it. At that point, like, oh God, like, I'm not qualified to do this.
Yeah, the summer before the fall semester, you can create a little bit of a runway, but eventually you'll catch up to yourself. And the first time teaching a course, eventually you will be learning it for the first time, if it's a new course. The night before class. Is there anything from teaching online that you think you will retain for when we are finally back in a live classroom?
I really like the fact that the lectures are recorded for the students to watch later. And so what I do is like I do synchronous classes, but I don't force anybody to come to class. If they don't want to, they can just watch the video later. And I think that's been really helpful because they all attend class actually, which is great. And some of them even have their videos on. So thank you to my students listening for turning on their video. It's less lonely out there. And yeah, they still like watch the video later and like go back to the notes. And so I really like that. And it's possible to do it during live lectures as well. Like UV has like a UD system where if in a certain classroom they can comment. But it's fun. So I'll probably continue that. The other thing that I like is the chat format. Like I love but I don't have a big class and usually they'll interrupt me because it's small and that's not a problem if they have a question. But I had students that were like a little bit more shy and so they would just like send me questions in the chat, sometimes in private mode, so that they don't have to like share with the entire class. And that was really fun because I got way more questions than I usually would during the lecture. So I'll probably try to keep that. Maybe like a text message system. I don't know how I'll do it, but there must be a way.
I love that. I know that there are apps. I know that there are startup companies that are working on apps for education. Another thing I would add to your excellent list of things to retain from Zoom are name placards, because it is awesome to be able to call on people and have their name and their face. But that would be a very low-tech solution that we could be like the United Nations, where we just had our placard in front of us. And the other thing is the ease of doing a poll in class. And I know it takes a lot of forethought to upload the poll questions ahead of time, but it's a much more integrated way than like the clicker system in a live class, which I don't have much experience with, but in Zoom it just seems so easy to do. And this is also part of like everyone's got a smartphone now, so you don't really need a clicker. You can run your poll on the phone. So these are all aspects. It is harder to do like breakout rooms if you want to do like problems in class and use kind of like the flipped classroom methodology. We've had a little bit of a little bit of success with that so far, but it's definitely harder. It's also harder to move around as the instructor or the TA. But all in all, I think teaching in the future will be better, having done this, like gone through hell with this one full year. I think it's going to be by the end. But yeah, good list.
Yeah, I have a few more things. Like what here's another good thing about it in terms of like the way the exams and are designed. Like I feel like moving away from the classic memorization and like sitting down exam for an hour, like you have to become a little bit more creative. And I like that. It's like I think like, well I'm not super creative with what I do. Like I do graded homeworks and then we do like final papers and presentations on Zoom at the end of the year. But I think that's going to work better than the classic.
Yeah, because unless you're going to enforce some super strict, impossible to enforce, you know, no open book, even though they're at home policy, you might as well just assume that students can access anything they want, and then you have to be a lot more creative in the way that you pose your questions.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm lucky I can do this because I have a graduate class and it's small. But I can't imagine like if you have a like teaching general chemistry and you have like 500 students, like you have to be really creative. And I think good things are going to come out of it. If the ideas won't come from me, but people will have good ideas.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Laure, for doing this.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure. It was really fun.